Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is doing okay and can hear me fine. I think we are nearing to holiday season and it's exciting, and we are having a lot of people today joining us, probably first time. So we'll quickly get started and we'll discuss lots and lots of interesting stuff. And we have still people joining in. So as an icebreaker question, let me know what book you are reading currently or you have recently finished. I'll share mine first, and then I'll let you finish. So I went into a romantic book this time, Jojo Moyes' Me Before You, very old one, but I thought let me read it. Probably it is based on a movie. Movie is also based on that, and now I have picked up this one, Ikagai, yesterday. So this is a nice one. I would recommend if you are into self improvement, this could be a really good book to get started. Let me know what you are reading or any recommendation you could give to me for any of the good books to get my hands on. Anyone? And while we go with that, let me introduce everyone to you. So we have Parna with us, then we have Sharik, and then we have Prasad, and then also we have Shashank. Probably he's backstage, but yeah, good to have all of you here. And we would be starting soon. I'm reading some answers here. Anyone, like we are discussing this? What is your favorite book, Parna, Sharik, and Prasad? Anyone? And Shashank also.
I don't land up completing many books. I have like plenty of books with bookmarks. Just
Okay.
I keep reading more of articles. Yeah, but I hope to finish all the books someday.
That's good, good one.
I'm,
Good.
I'm
Sharik?
currently reading this Big Con. It's about again, not a very positive. It's more about the problems with the consulting industry and the big
Okay.
5, 6 corporations. Let's not take the names here, but it's
Okay.
a nonfiction, so it's backed with facts and figures about all the things what has been done. Very interesting book, by the way. I'm halfway through. And it's like a revelation.
Nice one. Nivedita is going for psychology of money. That's interesting
Oh
one.
yes, that's a good one.
Prasad.
Yeah. So my all-time favorite book is The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand.
Hmm.
Currently, I'm not reading any specific book, but yeah, if you ask me all-time favorite, that's one. Second one are few books by Paulo Coelho. I know everyone would
It's a
have
good
heard of
one.
The Alchemist,
The
but my
Alchemist.
favorite one of Paulo Coelho is The Zahir.
Hmm.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good one. I agree on that. It's like it's been like for a long time been top seller. Paulo Coelho's Alchemist, and it was really
Yeah.
really the great story around it.
Yes, like
Alchemist
Paulo
is like
Coelho,
one of the classics. It has become.
yeah,
Uh,
the Paulo Coelho, like the best part about him is that he takes a persona and then explains the life through that particular persona.
I
In the
agree.
Zahir, the book that I love the most of him, the persona is a writer, and he himself is a writer, and that's why I believe he was able to, do it the best, justice to it. Though he has done justice to almost every book that he has ever written, but yeah.
Hmm. Good. How about you, Shashank? What is your favorite one? Or are you currently reading? Oh, that is
Working
working
backwards.
backward. Wow.
And the Employee of the Year award
It
goes
has to
to
be. It
Shashank.
has to be.
No, I'm trying to wrap my head around,
Uh,
I've heard about
that's
work
good one.
backwards. So I was like, this is what it is. So trying to, spend Diwali weekend over, unwrapping. But yeah, the another one which I really like is Ikigai. It's about, how you find your creative spot, what you like and what you want to do and what you want to achieve. Intersection of everything is a sweetest spot. And I think so I have found mine. So I'm happily, found it fluttering here. So yeah.
That's interesting. That's good one. All right, sir. Thank you, everyone. And we will get started. And we will go with the technical track first. I'll remove others from the stage. And obviously, our curious customer, Parna, would be there. We would try to answer as many questions as we can from her. And while we are answering the question, we will start learning about the machine learning thing. So hopefully, everyone would enjoy. Keep your questions coming. We have Prasad, Sharik, and Shashank at the backstage, and they would be answering the question. So anything which you feel relevant, irrelevant, feel free to ask it, and we would try to answer it. And the later part of the session, we would have somebody coming up and helping us with understanding the cloud portfolio, how to build it. We get this question a lot: how I can build and showcase my cloud portfolio. So we'll talk about it. Let's first start with the technical track. Welcome, Parna. Hope last time Shashank was able to answer some of your question related to Bedrock, and now we would go further into the process of building machine learning model, understanding what machine learning is. So let me know how I can help you today.
Definitely, Ashish. So your previous sessions with my team and Shashank's insights into Bedrock was really great. Now I've just hired a new team, and we have identified some business use cases where I need to build our own machine learning models right from
Mhm.
scratch. And I wish to know from you before my team starts working on it. They are upskilling, so obviously I don't want to push them right into start building. So maybe you can acquaint them with the process of machine learning, what is involved in it, and then we can move ahead with further questions. Is that okay?
Okay, good. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So I agree. Means machine learning, the word looks complicated, and when some things which are very popular, there is no formal definitions of it, and then you have lots of stuff coming around it, machine learning, generative AI. So people get confused. Let me give
Right.
you an analogy so that you could get some understanding that how things start. And
Yeah.
machine learning, technically speaking, is very simple. It is lot of mathematics and lot of statistics, but I'll try to give you some example so that you could start relating to some of the stuff, and probably your team members would understand it
Definitely.
better. So let's
Yeah.
take an analogy, a very simple one. Let's say we have been given a requirement that we have to build a mechanism, a software, or a way where we could identify difference between beer or wine. Very simple
Okay.
example. Obviously I don't have to drink both of them. I just want a model who would predict it. And if some of you are going through that phase of having your beer or wine right now on the weekend, enjoy it. But I'll explain what we want to do. What our requirement is that given a drink sample, I want to build a model who would be able to tell me whether this drink is a beer or a wine. Very simple thing, right? Now, how we will go ahead with this particular type of approach, and this approach can become, in let's say you have a picture of a dog or a cat, or you have a data which is fraudulent or which is not a credit card transaction, so it could relate to both of it. Let's go ahead and discuss some of the very basic stuff associated with it. So I want to, let's say, build a machine learning model. The name is complicated. I would say it is still a piece of software which is running somewhere. And once a piece of software is there, as we do, what we will do, we will provide some input. Obviously input will not be in terms of pouring me a wine glass onto a computer, but it would be some details about wine or the beer, and then model would be giving me output whether the particular drink is a beer or wine. We are limiting to two things only, but we could extend this model to then identify rum or maybe other type of wine also, or other type of alcoholic drink or non-alcoholic drink. So we could go ahead and do this thing. That should not be a problem. But to get started, very basic here, what we need to know, we need to identify some features of a particular input which I am providing. What do you mean by feature? Let's go ahead and discuss that as a technical term here. What is a feature? So feature is something which is measurable property of a character. Like let's say I am an insurance processing company. So I would process my insurance claim as it comes in. I need to identify whether it was a male driver or it was a female driver at the time of accident, right? I may want to know that particularly this age group of this person, maybe their eyesight details. Maybe I want to know whether they are a good driver or a bad driver depending on the previous history they have. So that all information when I am gathering, that is what I would call a feature. I'll give you an example in a minute in beer and wine strategy. But gender, male or female, maybe driver rating, poor, fair, good, excellent, and then vehicle color, it could be red, blue, gold, silver, white. Maybe it is not that relevant for an insurance claim, but maybe there is a study that maybe silver vehicles are having more accidents. So we may need to figure out why it could be happening. So we gather some information about it. That is referred as a feature. And sometimes feature may not be directly visible. So what you may want to do, you may want to go with something called feature engineering. Very simple example here. So let's say we have credit card data, we have transaction ID, where is user based and where the transaction happened. So this is a very common information any credit card company would gather. Now, when I'm processing this data, I may not want to have home country and transaction country directly. I may just want to know whether this transaction was in foreign country or not. So what I did, I took existing information, processed it a little bit and created a new feature, which is my in foreign country false or true binary thing, much easier for machine to understand. Because if I go with this approach, then it would be very complicated for me to feed into model all the list of countries and then compare it. Rather than I just go with the binary thing, true or false, that is much easier for it. So hopefully feature is clear. So feature is a very important aspect of anything what you want to build. Now,
So
coming to
Ashish, I have
feature,
a
go ahead.
question about this. So you have these features over here, and there are some existing features. So I've heard about things like feature selection, feature extraction, and in this case, I can see an example where you've completely transformed the data to be more meaningful. So are these all related to feature engineering, feature selection, extraction, transformation? So is that
What you are seeing on the this raw transaction data, I would say this is a feature selection. See,
okay?
in a credit card transaction, it will not be just transaction ID. What it also would have, it would also be having one column of amount, let's say. Maybe it would
Right.
also have another column of the age group of the person, right? So maybe I'm not interested to get all the information. Maybe I'm not interested to know what is the age group for a person for just detecting a fraud. So instead of having all the features of that particular transaction, I picked up only on three. So this is my feature selection, and then I would go ahead and perform a feature engineering on top of it. So that is how we would be able to identify what is useful and what is not. So you may have a lot of feature, but it is not important that you go ahead and capture every single feature with you. Does it make sense?
Okay. So it makes sense. So basically, I'm picking up only the relevant data and filtering
Relevant
out what is,
information.
yeah,
That's the
so
one.
that my model just gets trained on the data that is important and relevant to it, right? Right.
Absolutely. So, like, let's say you go to a restaurant and then you rate that restaurant. So, you would be rating out on some things like service, food quality, food quantity, maybe the pricing of the food, maybe the ambience, maybe the
Right.
courtesy of the waiter. So, these are the features. Now, what color of my tablecloth was, probably it will not be something relevant for my rating.
Hmm.
You get my point. So,
Yes.
there may be many features, and this is where you need to come up with the idea that what are the most relevant feature for you who would make an impact on the outcome you are looking for, right? So that's
Makes sense.
how we should be able to find out some features. So this is little bit of a trial and error kind of a thing, and that's why you will see that when we talk about LLM, they have thousands and thousands and millions of feature which they get trained on. So feature is very important aspect. It is the first building block for whatever you want to do into machine learning. Okay,
Makes sense. And I guess that's why we have feature engineers who are specialized to
exactly.
do this. Yeah.
True, exactly true. So means this is a new type of thing in a way that when machine learning started, we needed few people who could identify what is the most important aspect of the data, like credit card transaction or maybe purchase or maybe sales. So that is where feature engineering comes into picture. Now, coming back to our drunken world of beer versus wine, what could have here that we may have these two drinks and we may have multiple features of that. Maybe I have information about the glass shape, right? So we can identify things like if you clearly see wine glasses are completely different than the beer glasses. So do I want to go ahead and use that as a feature? Or do I want to use color as a feature? Wine may be red or white, and then maybe beer could be something which is in a different color shade. Then density, maybe pH value in that, maybe foam around it, how much is the foam, alcohol percentage. So there can be many features which I may be looking into, but I may not need everything to predict it, right? Now, more features I have, I would have more probability of getting the 199% right answer. You get my point? So if I'm just comparing a glass shape and say based on the glass shape, I will say whether it's a beer or wine, maybe I will not be accurate all 100% of the time. But if I keep on adding more features, then probability of getting the right answer would obviously increase. So hope you get that. So feature would be
Yes.
important here.
So we
Now,
are adding more variables, right, for
yes,
training. So
exactly.
these are the
So,
features.
so same like when you go to interview, why there is no one round and you get selected,
Right.
right? They go through
Hmm.
multiple round. Why? Because they are testing various things for you. Or you are good in technical, you are good in behavioral, you are good into team skills, you are good into leadership skills. So that is what combination we want to get it. Same thing here. We may have multiple features by which we should be able to identify something. In this case, it is just beer and wine. And let's say, for example, we go ahead and just select two features as of now to keep things simple. That I would be, when something comes up, I would ask what is the color of the drink, I would ask what is the percentage of the drink, drink, and based on that, I would say whether it is a beer or whether it is a wine. So that's what I am trying to do right now. So these are the two possible features which I have selected. Good.
Got it. Yeah.
Now, once you have this information and once you decided what you are going to capture, what we would start now, we would start doing the data collection phase. So in data collection phase, what I would be needing, I would need this data to be extracted, this information to be extracted. So I would need to identify the information about the alcohol percentage, and for that I could use hydrometer. So this is one method of collecting that information. What if that was mentioned into the bottle itself? I could have used it, but if it is not, I may have to find out what is the value of the given drink. So I have used a hydrometer to maybe collect data for the alcohol percentage. And second feature which we identified was the color, and maybe for that I am using a spectrometer. So once I have this information, I have right tools to collect the data. And once I have these right tools, what I would need now, I would need to go to a grocery store, get a lot of bottles from there, beer and wine, and then I would start performing the test. I would start collecting the data from it. So you have your data, you identify what information you need, you build that pipeline, and now you would start gathering that data as we move forward. Is this thing clear?
Yes. And I guess after we collect the data, we'll also have to identify where to store the data also, right? So
Exactly.
that's also
So see, if it's a simple experiment which I'm doing, I'm okay to store this information of beer or wine into Excel sheet, right? But if I'm talking about a financial transaction, probably Excel sheet would not scale or would not be that much secure information. So I may need databases on that. Or let's say my data is unstructured, then I may need a data lake for that. Or if it is a huge amount of data, I may need a data warehouse for that. So it will depend on what type of data you are collecting, and based on that, you would be able to go ahead and get started. Makes sense?
makes sense. Yeah.
Good. Now, why would be collecting data? So let's say I'm keeping things simple. I have collected information about the drinks. What is the color? That is a nanometer, alcohol percentage 14, 15, and 610, color depth, and maybe I have alcohol percentage 5 in beer. So I would have huge amount of data being collected. The more data you have, your model would be more accurate, right? But again, you need to find a balance that I cannot go and get 10,000 bottles of wine and beer and then collect data from it. So I may be limited to how much I can store, how much time I have, how much money I have, but more data, more accurate prediction. And that's why LLMs are successful, because they have been trained on large set of data, because they can now see a lot of samples. But if I just go ahead right now, let's say with only these 3 samples. So now what I did, my model, if it is just based on these these three data, then it will happen like 77%, it would have 66%, it would have probability of identifying every drink as wine. Why? Because in the data set, it is able to see wine more than beer. So it is automatically become biased, as you could clearly see here. You get my point?
Okay. So I guess even the quantity and diversity of the data is also important. And like you said, if we have too much of data of a particular type, then the model will tend to be biased towards that, right? So we need to
Exactly.
ensure quantity, quality, and diversity as well.
I would debate the diversity. It depends on what you are trying to build from the model. Let's say if I am talking about only detecting the fraudulent registration on my website, so then there is no diversity in my data. Only I
Right.
would get would be the registration detail. But let's say
Okay.
if I am talking about the image generation UI or image generation model, then diversity would be really, really be helpful. But it will not be the case in every situation. Every situation is different.
Depends
You
on the
need to
use
figure out
case.
what you are trying to predict, and based on that, you may need diversity. But volume, you would always need. That is, I would say.
Got it. And in the volume case also, some of the, if it's too much, possibly we won't even have the capacity to label them and do
Exactly.
supervised learning, right?
Yeah,
So if
means
it's too
again,
much
it is
at
a
the
fine balance. So if you have, let's say, if I have collected 10,000 bottles of beer and wine, and I'm a single person, I may not have time to test every single thing from that or gather data from it. So this is
right,
obviously going to be something which is feasibly, which is can be done humanly or into a proper way. Otherwise, it would take so much time. So we will discuss those aspects,
right.
that when you may need to engage third parties also to collect data. So as we progress forward, we will see some of the stuff as we move.
Okay. I'm sure there must be some tools which help to prepare this data, right? Like you
Yes, there
said,
are
it's
many
humanly
tools.
not possible
So
to do
yes,
it.
we would need tools, and we would need also tools where somebody would say, "Hey, this is a picture of a dog. This is a picture of
Hmm.
a cat," because model doesn't understand it. So
Right.
somebody has to
Human
have a
review.
mechanism to
Hmm.
tag those resources as some specific information.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And as you were saying, that if I have a data which is imbalanced, something like this, I have collected more data for beer and more or less data for wine. So obviously, I have created imbalance, and that's why my model would not be predicting. So it may not be always possible, but you would be trying to give the model a balanced information that okay, this is how much the maybe we have 5,000 record for beer, and maybe you have 4,500 record for wine. So that is what we would try to do, so that it would be much easier for your use case. Right? Okay, so this is how we would prepare data, and what we would also do, whatever we collected, it is good data. We will not use the whole data for training purpose. What we'll do, let's say we have collected 1,000 record for the data which we wanted to process through model. From that, probably we should be keeping some data aside for evaluation purpose. So once my model is built, I should be taking care of evaluation also afterwards, and it is no point to give the same training data to model for evaluation, because it is then going to predict the same output every time.
Right.
So I may not know whether it is working fine or not. So it is always suggestible, whatever is your training data, don't use the exact same data for evaluation. Use a separate data set which you can leverage for evaluation of your model. So that is how you should be framing your applications. Make sense?
Makes sense. So basically, we don't want the model to only be giving answers based on what it's trained on. It should be able to give inferences based on real world data also, which it's never seen as well, right? So that's
Exactly.
the reason we remove that part of the data for testing and evaluation data.
Yeah. So consider like you give a certification exam, you do
Hmm.
mock test. Mock test gives you idea of what kind of information you would be processing, but the question in exam would be obviously very different, right?
Right.
So you may get lot of information about okay, this could be a possible question, that could be a possible question, but it is not a guarantee that it is the same data which you will get into your actual exam. So yes, training data would be separate. It may be similar to what we would use for evaluation, but better to keep them separate. Right.
Great. Yeah, makes sense.
Good.
And I guess in the evaluation stage, we will be actually be tweaking our machine learning model as well, right, based on the performance. So this is
Makes
at
sense.
this stage that we do it, right, in evaluation.
Yeah, means so once your model is ready, you would want it to run and test into a controlled environment before you let it
Hmm.
loose into production. That hey, is it
Right.
working fine or not? So we would then evaluate it.
Got it. Makes sense.
Okay. Now then comes the option of what I should be selecting as my model. Now, model selection little tricky, and probably we may not have time to cover everything here, but I can give you some hints like consider what kind of data you have and what you are trying to predict from it. What is your input and what is your output? So based on that, you would go ahead and select your model. Now, right now, the use case I have selected of beer or wine, it's a very simple use case. It's not a complicated use case. I'm not creating like I'm trying to predict the when the next earthquake will be happening or when this volcano would erupt. That is a huge data set. So I have very
Hmm.
simple data set here, and for that, one thing I am clear: I have my data set which is labeled. Why? Because somebody has said this is alcohol percentage, this is the color spectrum, and that is what is beer or alcohol. So what I have here is a labeled data. So your selection of model will be mostly triggered by two things. First thing, what output you are looking for, and what kind of data you could provide as an input to it. So you may use different type of model, different type of algorithm, and if you have watched our previous videos, you would know we talked about supervised, unsupervised reinforcement learning. So probably this is a good use case for supervised learning because I am providing information manually or I am saying specifically that, hey, this one is alcohol, this is beer, and this is wine. So I have a labeled data set and it is not a very complicated data set. So that is where I would be selecting a linear regression as an algorithm. Now, this is where you would need to understand some bits of mathematics or statistics. right? And if you do not have that data, that kind of information, we have some capabilities into the product which is called Amazon SageMaker, which can identify the data set and then give you the required supervised or unsupervised machine learning model. So it can tell you that this data set looks good for this type of use cases, and probably this should be model. And you can experiment, right? Not every model would always give you the same type of result. Every model's result can be different. So that is where some type of information you need to process, see where it is coming up, where it is giving you the required information, and based on that, you would move forward from there. Okay.
So what you're saying is either we can automate this where SageMaker, as you said, the service SageMaker can also choose models for you, or you could customize and you can make choices based on your problem. So if it's a classification problem, you choose a certain model. If
Exactly.
it's translation, you choose another model.
You
Yeah,
select different type of thing. Yeah, I
makes sense.
agree. But see, you cannot completely just rely on that automation tool. You would know
Okay.
your use cases better. Those tools may be trained on generic information, but sometimes you may want to have combination of algorithm also. So maybe one
Good.
data set and second data set, they both are different. At one place, labeled data goes well. Another place, maybe unlabeled data goes well. So you may have combination also. That can also happen. Shouldn't be an issue at all.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Good. All right. So once, let's say we selected it, and now linear regression. Now this is where mathematics come in. You don't have to be a top-notch PhD mathematician for that. I will just try to show you some very basic example. Now it is linear regression, or it is a way where my entity is linearly proportionate or linearly related. So what I'm drawing here, I'm trying to draw a single line here. And if anyone knows about what is the geometrical equation for a line, so line's equation is y equal to mx plus b. This is where a little bit of mathematics is coming up. So we have here y is the output, m is the slope of the line. So like this line is slope here, I may have another line whose slope could be here, I may have another line whose could be slope could be like this. So this is what we can control. And then we have y-intercept, that where my line is starting, at which particular place it is starting. So this is a linear regression equation of a straight line. And here, if you know, input I cannot change, I cannot change the output also. This is what I would provide to my model. So mathematicians will play with these two things, which is called slope and which is called y-intercept. But in our day-to-day language, we may call it slope and y-intercept. In machine learning world, this is referred as something which is called biases and weights. So what we do here, we have these biases and weights, and through that we are able to get the data coming up. So this is what the equation we are going to use, and through that we would be predicting the possibility of VR or Y. Okay. So this is
So y
obviously,
is
this
the
is
targeted value, right, Ashish? So it's the output we are predicting based on some variables x. So there could be
yeah. So
multiple variables.
input is fixed. Input we would say alcohol percentage 5, color spectrum 65 nanometer, right? So that's what we
Okay.
are trying to do here. And based on that, we would be able to then adjust slopes and adjust weight and biases, and then we would come out to it. So when you start plotting this information into a graph, this is how it may look like. Consider the red dots are representing your wine and yellow dots are representing your beer, right? So this is how the dots would look like. This is just a very pictorial representation of it. And when you will draw the line, basically it would be something like this initially. And then by adjusting the weights and biases what you have introduced, your job would be to ensure that you are able to move this line in a way where it differentiating beer and wine completely different. So whatever weight, whatever biases you have into your data, you would then control it, and through that you would come to a model who can now clearly identify, okay, anything below this line would be wine, anything above this line would be beer. And that's how I would say my machine is able to identify this thing. And yes, this is what we relate to. Transformer is little different. Pawan has a question here. Weight and bias also relate to transformer in a way, yes, but there we call it little differently. We call it temperature there. So this weight and bias mostly come when you are building the model. When model is generating the inferences, that time we mostly refer that as a temperature. So we'll talk about that also when the time comes.
I guess
So is this thing
temperature
clear?
more for generative AI, right? Which
Yes,
controls the
generative AI.
creative.
So temperature, in a way, if I say, let's say I set temperature to 1, what would happen in that case? I'm giving my model more liberty. Hey, be more creative. So it could be good when I am doing a chatbot conversation, but when I am going to perform, let's say, a letter writing, or I am writing a formal letter, I would say my model, hey model, don't be too much creative. Stick to the language which is expected as a formal letter. So I would go ahead and say temperature down. Consider a temperature is like your room temperature. When temperature is okay, you would be freely moving around. But if temperature is too cold, you would probably cease your activities and sit down into a corner. So same thing applies with generative AI models. So temperature controls the creativity or the freedom we are giving to the model.
Makes sense.
So this is what, on a very, very high level, what we refer as machine learning. So we picked up a problem, we collected the data associated with it, and then we started plotting that what could be the best suitable model associated with it. And once my model has been given all this information, I would test it multiple times. I would reiterate it. We can go through multiple cycles of the training, and afterward, I would make it ready into production so that we can get started and get our application ready from there. Make
Great.
sense?
Yeah. So this really makes sense. But I'm just thinking, is it humanly possible for just one role to do all these things? Right. So I'm not sure whether a single person can do this. Can you tell me about the different types of roles that are involved in this? Because I can pick and choose and hire people accordingly. Because that will really make sense. Who's involved at what stage?
I agree. Means if I'm talking about enterprises like yours, I won't expect the one single person or one single team to be working on this type of data. Consider a huge data set. Consider the huge creativity you need. So obviously it is not humanly possible for one single person to get started. So I'll give you a high level overview of that, how your human element comes into machine learning. So obviously there are machines who would be learning, but we have to make them learn, and that is where the human element would be coming in. So let's go ahead and talk about what would be the human element in this particular case. Now, if you think about machine learning, I would say it is a pipeline. In a pipeline, from one end you put the input, and then it goes through processing, and on the other hand you will get your output. Whether it could be prediction, it could be some generation of images, whether it could be some other type of output you are trying to get, but there is a process which is happening. So there is a pipeline we are building it. You could call it machine learning workflow, you could call machine learning pipeline, you could call machine learning orchestration. It can be different thing, but what happens here, that this will be starting with data ingestion. So we may be collecting data from various sources. Like my beer and wine example, I was manually collecting data. I was ingesting data by my spectrometer and my hydrometer, and then I was getting the data. That data has to be stored somewhere. Now, in a traditional world, it could be just your databases, but now we are not just limited to databases. We may have data lakes, we may have lake house architecture, we may have data warehouses, maybe we have um, structured, unstructured, semi-structured data. So all of this we would be getting, and that is where data ingestion and data storage would be happening. So this is very, very important aspect of it. Once you gather this data, you would be then going ahead and will go ahead with something called model development based on this information. And then once your model has been developed, you would go with the validation process of it. So you would validate whether it is a right model or not, and then your model would be deployed so it can handle the real life situation when it comes in. And it's not done. Model development or model deployment is a good thing, but it has to be reiterated. Means this whole pipeline would start again and again. You would monitor the model. If it is making mistake, you would again do the data ingestion, then storage, and then implementation, and then deployment and monitoring. So this is an iterative process you would be going through. I'm putting this information from very high level, Parna. Obviously there can be more specific roles within it, but on a very high level, one team or one individual would be data engineer, whose main job is to get data ingested and stored data in a way which can be leveraged by other team. So it may be performing aggregation, it may have its own pipeline working, but their job would be to ensure that our data scientists have the real data or actual data which they need to work on. So that is data engineer. And this
So
data
Ashish, I'll
engineer,
just
go ahead.
stop you there. So as a data engineer, what sort of skills should a data engineer have? I'm guessing that they should have skills related to databases, like you said, data stores, and what other things? Maybe big data. Hadoop and Spark. So I'm hiring,
It
so I need to
depends.
know what will I look for.
Most of the time these skills will come handy, but now we may, so big data can be really useful if you have data warehouse type of solutions, right? But if I'm talking about streaming data, then probably you need to find different type of tools. So it depends on
Okay.
what type of data you are gathering, but for any data you would need skill like storing data, sorting data, ingestion, cleaning, data preparation, you could call it. So we have to then combine data, collate data, maybe secure it, encrypt it. All this information would be needed. So you would need skill, anything to build a data pipeline like ingestion,
Yeah,
then
like a data
filtering, then
analyst,
storage.
right? A data
Completely.
engineer. Okay, makes sense.
No,
Yeah.
data analyst will be a little different. Data analyst would be then making sense of whatever data you collected. So
Okay.
this person's job is to ensure you have sufficient data, and now my analyst can then perform analysis on it and then give me
Okay.
result. So if you
Okay.
tell me that, okay, how many people attend BESA session? So I need to gather that data first. So that is I am doing as a data engineer. And then you will analyze that on weekend, this is the number of people. On weekdays, these many people attend. This is how the videos are watched. If we had US time zone, how many people attended? That is what you are doing in an analysis part. But me, individual, is just giving you data and then you perform analysis. So data analysis is on top of what data engineer has gathered.
Okay. So just to reiterate my understanding, so a data engineer is just concerned with collection, storing, pre-processing of the data, and your data
Yeah.
analyst is the one who's going to actually examine that data, find patterns, and things like that. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is little blur line, because there can be business analyst also, there can be
Hmm.
data analyst also. So yeah, somebody who would analyze the data which you collected, and that is sometime also done by data engineer, right? So data engineer is collecting data. Now it is not blindfoldedly collecting data. It need to understand what values are making sense, or what are the features associated. So it would need some exploratory data analysis, as we call it. It should be able to understand, like, okay, I have to merge these two tables. What are the common keys between them, or what columns are of not of importance, or what column is sensitive so that I do not push it into my data lake, like credit card numbers. So all the exploratory data analysis will also be done by your data engineer.
Got it.
Good. Now, once your data is ready, and we are considering that it is a very bulky part, very complicated part initially, then the information will be coming to the data scientist team. Data scientist team, this is mathematicians, I would say, more statistical oriented people who think more into binary numbers rather than human language. These people would perform these model development, and model validation will be done on that. So this is
So
where
the
a lot of
skills,
your analytical
Ashish.
skills will come into picture.
Yeah. So I just wanted to ask you. So what kind of skills should I look for in my data scientist? So I'm guessing they should know programming languages like Python and R.
See, Python is one good way, but it is not just limited to that. And now there are a lot of tools available. We will discuss them if the time comes,
Okay.
that they can give you like no code kind of environment where you can perform
Okay.
these type of tasks. But yes, that still would be expected that you know some programming skills here, you know statistics, you know mathematics. So that is what data scientists will be performing all these things. So once you get a business problem, once you give them data, they should be able to formulate that information into a mathematical way so that they can create a model around it, right? So that is
Right.
where their skills will come into picture. So yes, programming would be needed. Python is a very common thing which people use. Then within Python you have Panda, then you have R. So different type of tools, or maybe you could utilize, and it depends on what you are doing. Within that, it can also be there in data scientist team that some people are purely focused on the architectural part of things, and some maybe on the programming side of it. So it can also happen.
So Ashish, is this data scientist the one who's actually going to draw out those features which we spoke about earlier about feature engineering? So they will do
It
that as
it is it is a good question, and this one is like a combined task, I would call it. So if I say feature engineering is a task which is data engineer and data scientist will work together. So see, this pipeline is not a complete isolated pipeline. Like, hey, I done my work, I don't care what you are doing. No, there will be a lot of collaboration required. Like here, data storage team or data engineer and data scientist will work together, and then they will say which feature will be useful, right? So if
got it.
data scientist is not able to identify what features are useful, or maybe vice versa, then it is not going to work. So we need to work together in this particular case. So feature store, because technically speaking it is a storage, so it should be data
Hmm.
engineer who should take care of it. Which features will go into it, that is the work of data scientists. So they should work together, and then they would come up with their
build the,
feature store
yeah,
information.
got it. So essentially, the data scientist is the one who's building the machine learning model. So they'll pick and choose the features from the feature store, like yours, and build it up, right? That's why they need their mathematical and statistical skills.
Exactly. And they need to work with data engineer also. Like if they are looking for a feature which is not being populated by data engineer, let's say I thought that information is not important, but maybe data scientists think that is important. So we need to coordinate and ask that person, hey, what
Collaborate.
features you are building or what data would be important for you? And based on that, I could collect that pipeline.
Got it.
And similarly, a lot of overlap will happen. So when your model is deployed, your model is being monitored, probably it will not be a data scientist who would be involved in all these things. He may not know what a EC2 is or what is an endpoint or what is a HTTPS. So that is where we would be needing people like ML engineer, machine learning engineer. So machine learning engineer's job is to ensure that we would be ensuring that my model is deployed properly, it is being monitored, it has the required capacity, it is able to collect the data for performance, it is able to respond when there is outages. So that will all be done of the ML engineer here. So ML ops, this whole process what you refer is what we call as machine learning operations, but ML engineer would be more focused on those operations side, whereas data engineer would be in data ingestion, and then data scientist would be there. So when we are talking about ML ops, that will be coming through pipeline. So in that case, now there is a collaboration happening between your data scientist and ML engineers, right? So model is a software. Software would have version. So let's say we have come up with a newer version of the model. It has to be deployed. Obviously, we don't want to manually deploy it. So we need to build pipeline like we have CI/CD pipeline. So similar type of pipeline would be built, and that would be maintained and managed by the ML engineers here. So this
So
is how the
Ashish,
process
I'm
would
just
look like.
thinking the ML engineer seems to have a multifaceted role, right? Of a software engineer, plus should have ML skills, plus should do infrastructure management, because they are the ones who's going to deploy the machine learning application, as you're saying, on production, plus monitor it. So they have a multifaceted role, right?
Agree on that. But I would still say that they do not need to know what algorithm was used for model. Maybe, right?
Okay.
If they know it good, they can make better decisions. But they are more focused on what we call keeping the lights running or keeping the lights on. So they give me something, I would ensure it runs highly available, it is secure, it is scalable, it has less outages. That is my job. What you want to run in that particular piece of code, that is what the model has been given to me by my data scientist. So they work together. So there is obviously some specific task ML engineer will do, but it is not working in isolation. So because let's say I want to deploy the model. Now, how many people would be accessing it? What kind of data they would be inputting? What is the retention requirement? What is the requirement for compliances on that? So that is where I have to coordinate with other teams also. So it cannot work in isolation.
Right, makes
Right.
sense.
Now, there is a question I want to take from chat. Sebastian is asking what services AWS offers for ML pipeline. So, Sebastian, there is SageMaker. We will be hopefully at least will be able to show you what SageMaker is, and then we will move forward from there. But yeah, this is how the roles are. Now, just to simplify these things for you, Parna, I would put it like in this method: like data engineer, they build the data infrastructure, storage, retention, and then encryption, and then ensuring that it is not being seen by other people. That infrastructure is made by data engineers. On the other hand, machine learning engineers will be building the machine learning infrastructure like your model pipeline, your model inferences, then the log collection, then maybe abuse stopping. All these will be done. And data scientist, so maintenance will be done by data engineer and ML engineer. And data scientists would utilize the data infrastructure as well as machine learning infrastructure, and that's how your prediction would be happening. So these are the common roles you will find into a data engineering team. And now with generative AI, we have more roles coming up. Like we may need people for labeling the data. We may need model verification for that. We may need other type of creativity people on that. So those roles are also evolving as we speak. But this is on a very high level. These are the three more common categories of roles which exist into the whole machine learning world on a high level.
Makes sense. So basically, the data engineer is maintaining and building the data pipeline, and the ML
Yes,
engineer is maintaining and building the ML pipeline, right?
exactly.
Okay. So this looks like a whole lot of tasks. Can you break it down and simplify this workflow and tell me?
Yeah, so let's see. It is a workflow, and workflow can obviously have different steps associated with it. I'll keep it high level, and then I'll go into individual tasks. But if I'm talking about a machine learning workflow, this is a iterative process first of all. So it's not like, hey, we have done this one time and now done and dusted. I would never revisit it. It's not like that. So first thing would come is to prepare your data. Once it is ready, you would build your data, build your model on top of it. You would train your model, and then you would deploy your model. So this is on a very high level what the 4 steps would look like: prepare, build, train, and deploy. This is how things would be looking like. And within each of these phases, there would be sub phases involved. I'm just putting high level information here, Parna. Like, I may need to prepare data. For that, I need data collection. I may need to do some exploratory analysis on that. I may do some feature engineering on that, and then build would happen. In that case, this one is taken care by data engineer, and in the build I would do model evaluation, because there may be multiple models. I may need to check which one is more
Which one
suitable for my
performs
use
best?
case, right? So I would do that. Once I identify that, I would build that particular model. Then it would be requiring training, so I would train the model. I don't expect that a model would give me the exact finest result on the very first thing. Like, you learn driving, right? So I don't expect that on the very first trial run you are becoming perfect. You may not know which switches to use, when to steer, when to use brake, when to use accelerator. But as you go through multiple training sessions, you become more confident driver, right? Same thing here. So we need to train model. Multiple iteration may be required for training also, and then we would start adjusting. So those parameter tuning will also be done, and these two tasks will be mostly done by your data scientist team. And afterward, when comes deployment, in deployment we need to deploy the model, we need to monitor the model, and that is where your ML engineers will come into picture. And as I said, this is an iterative process. So once you have taken care of these things, you would need to retrain your model also. So you collected data, right? And then you process it. You process
Right.
it, then you again process it again, then perform the preparation and building and training and deploy. So that is
It's an
how you
iterative
become more and more
process.
accurate. It is iterative, right? So
Got
just by learning one time, it doesn't mean that I have become perfect. Yes, maybe I can drive, but maybe I have not driven on a road which is into or it is having all the snow on that. Maybe I have not
right.
driven into desert. Maybe I have not driven into heavy rain. So by the time different data sets will come, and that would make my model more mature as we move forward. So it becomes an iterative process. Obviously, you may not need the whole effort, and through the tools available, you could make all of these things automated. So once your model is not making, let's say, prediction percentage has become like 40% accurate, 70% accurate, you could say this is a time to go for retraining. So you could use that input, automatically retrain your model, get a newer version of the model, and deploy it again. So all of these can be done in an automated fashion, and that is where SageMaker as a service from AWS can be really helpful.
Makes sense. And over here, when you're talking about parameter tuning, you're talking about hyperparameter tuning, right? Things like
Hyperparameters.
when you are saying retraining it, maybe we would want to train it multiple times, the number of times, the training rate,
Exactly.
the size of the batch size of the data, all that comes here. So every time in the new cycle,
In
if
the
we see
loop,
that it's
yeah, you would use hyperparameter tuning. So through that,
yeah,
you would be able to fine tune it and get the most accurate result for it.
got it. Makes sense. So
Right.
do you have
Like
like
you
an
cook, right?
example?
When you cook something, like you may taste it and feel, oh, there is a little less salt. Let me
Yeah,
add little more
add
salt, right? So
some,
this is how it works.
right. Got it. Makes sense. Would you have an example to show me a quick workflow?
Yeah. So let's see that how. So this looks theoretical. Now let's
Hmm.
see how we would build similar type of stuff into AWS, right? So I will give you a very basic POC level example. It is not at all a production example, but just to give you an idea that what services may fit in into this particular space. Let's see that. So first of all, you could deploy everything into your AWS account. So you would need your AWS account, right? And
Hmm.
then within AWS, you may have your data into different locations. You may have S3 based data, you may have data into Redshift, maybe in a traditional database, maybe into data lake, maybe into AWS Glue. And then when we are just representing your data sources which are in AWS, but it may happen that your data in S3 came from a production plant, or maybe from a smart car, or maybe from a sensor device into home. So all this data I have to first bring into AWS. So that is what I have done here. So these are all my data sources. Obviously, it is not an exhaustive list, but it is the most common things which we are able to see here. So we are able to get all this information into this data sources. So this is what data engineer will take care. It will take care of glue cataloging. It would ensure that my RDS has been combined with my Redshift information. EMR is processing it, splitting the data, then removing duplicate and providing the accuracy check, removing the hidden values, all type of things. So that will be done by a data engineer. Once this is there, then comes the SageMaker information. So SageMaker is the product or the service, or this is a plethora of services within it, which is where we would be taking this data as an input, and that's where my data scientist would start building and training the model. So this service can help you with data preparation, with building the model, training the model, tuning the model. A lot of things can happen within SageMaker. Once your model is ready, once you have identified, tested everything, you would push that output of a model. It is basically a piece of software or group of files that you will push probably into an Amazon S3 bucket. And now from this Amazon S3 bucket, I would need to deploy it, and that is where my SageMaker endpoints will be coming into picture. So SageMaker gives you an interface where you can send your inference request, and that is where SageMaker endpoints comes into picture. And this will be hopefully be taken care by a machine learning engineer who would set up these endpoints, who would know when the new update comes in, how much traffic is allowed, what kind of security is needed, and what kind of performance is expected. So that ML engineer would take care of all these things. But still, if you look here, where is my user sending request to my model? So if you want, you could expose this endpoint directly, which mostly people don't do. What they would be doing, they would be exposing it through a API gateway and Lambda. So let's say these users here, they want to perform some processing, or they want to run some inferences, or they want to send some information and detect something. So my users would be sending information through API gateway, so I can take care of my security, authentication, logging, all of these things here. And maybe I could perform some pre-processing on my Lambda. So that can be one way. If I want, I could directly have used API gateway as a front end for my model, but most of the time you may perform some pre-processing, and that is where Lambda can be useful. And once Lambda is ready, it can push that information to your SageMaker endpoint, and that's how you would be able to have a model deployed. But this is a POC information. It is just like a very, very basic stuff. But if you are going to scale it, then obviously you would add more services, more type of component, more account, more security features would be added. But these are common services which you would be using when you are building your machine learning models. Does it make
That's
sense?
great. Yeah, this is a great example, and I can see like SageMaker Studio here, SageMaker Endpoint here. Can you tell me a little about SageMaker and what kind of problems it can help me solve? So I just want to know that, because I know about so many other services. So I
Agree.
exactly want to know what use cases SageMaker can help me solve.
So let's take a step back and try to understand that why we need SageMaker, right? We are not building services because its name is fancy or cool. We are trying to solve some business problems here. So what we are trying to understand here, that what problems exist into machine learning world. When I'm starting with my machine learning project, what kind of challenges we would be seeing. So first thing, machine learning is not a skill which everyone has, right? You cannot find everyone knows best maths or best statistics. So having enough machine learning builders is a common challenge which we see with our customers. Then that data which we are collecting, it is so much data. We are talking about a huge petabyte scale data. I cannot have manpower going ahead and then tagging all the data and then putting labels on it. It's not going to happen. So processing and labeling huge amount of data is one of the problem. Then maybe some data is collected into a different type of database. Maybe it is in a different format. Some data is in CSV format. Some data is into database table format. So these disparate data science tools are really a challenge, because there is no way to collate all these things. They are proprietary technologies, and that is where a lot of challenges comes in. And then manual operations like pushing a new model, collecting the data, performing matrix analysis on it, checking the accuracy of the model, checking the performance, balancing the cost. These are the common things which can happen. So that is where we tried, or AWS tried, to solve this problem. So first thing, we can give you tools which you will not need any code at all. So no code ML tools, this is what we want. We want to make sure that machine learning doesn't become like a rocket science and anyone can use it. So that is where no code ML tools will be available for you through SageMaker. Second problem of labeling and massive data. So can we give you some preparation tool which can help you with data preparation, and that can happen through your normal prompt. Like we can give a prompt and based on that my labeling can happen, so we can support that. So purpose built data preparation tools can be given to you. Then when you have different disparate tools, can we combine all of that into one single place? Yes, that is possible. So we can give you one browser interface, and through that you could perform end-to-end machine learning. You do not need to go to multiple interfaces or multiple tools for processing, and all these operation can be automated. So once you build the pipeline, as we saw, it is an iterative process. I don't want to go through the same process again and again, so I could automate. My model collects the data, it is monitored. If it is not working as expected, it can automatically go through the retrain cycle. So that will all be done by SageMaker. So that is where
That's
we
awesome.
need to find a tool who could help you in solving all these problems.
So SageMaker looks like it's the center of the entire machine learning
Exactly.
workflow, right? So it can do all of this, increase my agility,
One
automate
single
things.
place.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
So it is a
But
one-stop shop for all machine learning needs. Whatever your needs are, you want to label data, you want to do feature engineering, you want to deploy your model, you want to build your ML pipeline, you want to perform analysis of the data, you want to change your data, wrangling of the data, all of this can happen. And it is a fully managed service. So you do not need to keep on manually adjusting things here and there or updating or by patching something. We would take care of everything for you. So that is where SageMaker can be really, really useful for you.
that's great. So I'm a little confused now. Like we have Bedrock as well, and you mentioned about SageMaker and some managed service. So can you tell me a little, difference? When would I go for Bedrock? When should I go for SageMaker? So I'm a little confused there. If you could clarify.
Let me give you an analogy again. If you are hungry, you need to have some food, right? You could go to market and can get an instant food packet. You
Right.
just need to bring it home, put it into microwave for 2 3 minutes, and you are ready. So that serves the purpose, right? But I cannot
Yeah.
be, let's say if I need a very specific food which cannot be put into instant food, right? What I need to do now, I need to gather all the ingredients and cook that food myself. So that is where the differentiation comes. If I come into technical way, if I'm focusing on Bedrock is a higher level service. It is the good way when you know that I want to use a application which will be using existing foundation model. I want to use Llama, I want to use maybe Anthropic Claude, maybe I want to use Amazon Titan. They are good. They serve the purpose. I want to build a chatbot. It's not something which nobody has done before. It has been done multiple times. Models exists, and I just want to leverage the model which has already been created. So Bedrock would be good use case. So if I'm just trying to create generative AI application based on the foundation models with generic use cases, probably Bedrock is a good choice for me. But if the need comes that, hey, my use case cannot be solved by all this model, I am going to predict the what is the expectancy age of a human based on all the lifestyle which he or she has. So that time I may want to build everything from scratch. That is where SageMaker will come into picture. So if you're looking for building on top of existing models, probably Bedrock is a good choice. But if you want to build, retrain, and then fine tune models on your own, then SageMaker can be a really good choice. There are some features which can be overlapping. Like in Bedrock, also I can customize the
Do
model,
fine
I can
tune.
fine tune
Yeah.
the model. But yeah, SageMaker is purpose built when you have to start everything from scratch, whereas Bedrock is a little higher level service where you could leverage existing model and get the most out of those models as we move forward.
Okay. So what would be some of the generative UI use cases for SageMaker? Can you give me some examples?
So let's say I am putting a data set, or I am detecting that how maybe, let's say Tesla's example, maybe a car which I'm building, right? Or maybe I'm sending the next rocket to moon. There is no generative AI use case who would be solving that problem for me, right? So probably in that kind of predictions, I would need to build something from my own SageMaker information, right? I want to just add a customer support feature on my website. Probably Bedrock would be a good example. So some data set which is pretty unique to you, right? Or which has not been used in different type of
Proprietary.
situations before, proprietary type of thing. See, again, proprietary I won't use, because with Bedrock also you could use proprietary data set
Right.
and
Right.
retrain that model. But that could be generic thing. I have very specific use cases. Probably I would be good with SageMaker in that kind of situation.
Okay. And
Makes
then
sense.
I guess in SageMaker, you have an option to even use other open source models as well as import your own models, which is not there in
It's end to
Bedrock.
end.
I
It's
think
not
it's
just
a new
specific
feature.
to what we offer. You could extend its functionality, and there can be n number of things which can be done. It's a modular architecture. So you could say, hey, like when you get a food packet from outside and it says that add 2 spoons of sugar, fine. I need more sugar, I could add 3. Nobody's stopping me from doing it. So a lot of customization can also be done on that. Should not be a problem. So it's not like a proprietary, or see, behind the scene it is still using Python. Maybe it is still using other languages we are using. So it's not like you are logged in into a tool or a specific component. It is a very, very modular platform which you could leverage. So there can be a lot of things which can be happening. So if you have your foundation model and you want to customize it, and you have a task specific foundation model requirement, you could access your customized model, or sorry, you could access your publicly available FM's foundation model, and can then best fit to your use case. That can also be done. And if you feel, no, I have to build everything from scratch, I have my own data, I would build it, I would train it, I would deploy it, that can also work. Should not be a problem at all. So this is the whole thing which SageMaker can help you with. You can leverage existing foundation models, or you can build and leverage own. And it is possible most of the time in enterprise application that you would have combination of it. So some common thing like interaction, I don't want to build it. That data can be accessed from foundation model, but now that person has to given a specific information or specific prediction, probably I will build my foundation model for that. So it can be combination within one single application. Makes sense?
Makes sense.
Good.
So, Ashish,
So
would you
hope
have time to explain about the components and
that
features?
would be a little tricky because we have guests here already and it is 4 o'clock. So we had a lot of things planned for people who are attending. So maybe into next session, we would go into detail of individual SageMaker component and some console information also, so that you can see these things into action. But I hope
Sure.
people have understood basics of machine learning. It is not complicated. You have to see it by breaking it down into pieces, and it would make more sense. If you are looking at it as a whole, it could be complicated, but if you start breaking it down into smaller chunks, it would become much, much easier for you. Good.
Makes sense.
All right. Thank you, Parna. Good questions, and
Thank you,
hopefully
Ashish.
everyone enjoyed. And we would be sharing these slides, and we would be sending emails out to everyone by Monday probably, and you would have access to it. And feedback is important. Anything which you feel is not working and we could have improved upon, let us know, and we would be happy to accommodate that. Thank you. And I would have now Prasad being added onto the stage, and Parna will talk to you later. The Prasad, over to you, and I would
Hello again,
also be
everyone.
adding Ivo.
Hello.
Hey, Ivo, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, you guys?
Yeah, all good, all good. So let's start the behavioral section here. And the topic today is how to build your core cloud portfolio. And the guest speaker we have is Ivo. Ivo, let's start with your introduction.
Okay, so yeah, I'm a cloud solution architect at AWS. I work mostly with ISV customers, so basically software vendors, right, to put it simply. And before that, I would say I'm a network specialist because I was in Cisco before and I continue to uphold that until today, I guess.
Awesome. So you recently written a book on AWS cloud projects. What
Yeah.
inspired you to write that book?
Yeah, that's really a fun one, right? I know you also work at AWS, so you know, but other people might not know, right? That we do a lot of interviews, right? You don't have a specific role for an interview, right? Everybody at Amazon will be doing interviews, and I do a lot of those, right? Like now a little bit less, but I've done a lot of those, and I think it came a little bit from there, right? So as soon as I was interviewing these people, a lot of the people's applying, especially for more junior roles, were coming from an adjacent field. Let's say only networking, like myself in the past, right? Maybe only storage, maybe app dev. And many of them knew the cloud, especially like theoretically, right? Maybe they did certification, maybe something like that, but they lacked like hands-on skills, right? Like maybe they did a lab or two, but they really didn't build anything on their own. And I felt like I went to check online, right, other courses and so on. I felt like that was kind of missing still, at least in the book format. And it kind of came from there, right? I thought maybe I can help in somehow, right? The people that want to actually join the cloud journey like us.
That's awesome. And yeah, it's a common theme that comes across when people are trying to transition to cloud industry, or like trying to come get their first role in the cloud. that how to get hands-on experience if they do not get the experience in their current job.
Okay.
So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, how did you choose which projects to include in the book?
Yeah, that's actually a great question, because this book started initially, right? The first phase, it was never published, as a single project that you had ads on. So it was like your CV website, like your personal website, right? In every chapter, that was the first chapter, in every chapter you had something on top. For example, different languages, or a backend, or even a bot that can answer questions about yourself. So that was kind of the initial focus of the book. But then we changed it to different projects. So every chapter is actually a different project. And the way we got inspired, I have a co-author, right? So I cannot take the full credit here, right? It's like 50-50. But we work backwards, right, from, let's say, the most used cloud services. So we started like very basic, let's say, very simple project, like a static website. Then we did add compute, then add serverless, then add machine learning and analytics. So we kind of like build. But to answer your question, yeah, we really work backwards from what would we expect in an interview, right? Like for cloud solution architect. What will you be asked? Sort of, not necessarily only this, but what normally you are asked, right? And where would we like to people have skills on?
Yeah, and like that's mainly probably for AWS interviews, but like there are many companies who look for hands-on experiences in the in the job description and in the candidate's resume.
Yep.
So what types of AWS projects would you recommend that can effectively demonstrate the real-world problem-solving skills?
Yeah. So yeah, of course, the book is about AWS technologies, right? But you can build these in other clouds as well, right? Let's say a personal website could be a personal website in AWS or Azure. I think that most people look in a resume for real projects, and I will explain what I mean by real. Basically, something that you actually solve the problem on, right? Many times people do projects, self projects, just for doing them. Like, for example, following a script, like I don't know, tutorial or something like that. I feel like doing a project that actually solves something, and for sure you have a problem, you or any candidate, right? Like maybe you want to, I don't know, get the news in a specific format, or maybe, I don't know, you want a summary of what came out in some series, right? That could be a project, right? There's nothing stopping you from using your hands-on skills to build a tool for yourself. You don't need to sell it, right? It doesn't need to be a product. Just solve your own problem, right? I would even tell you my first personal project. I'm a very lazy guy. I didn't say that, but I'm a very lazy guy. So I wanted to read on my computer. I read a lot, but I don't like to scroll. I'm very lazy. I'm very, very lazy. So I basically used computer vision to track my eyes where I was reading, and it kind of scrolls for me. So that was like one of my first projects. Then I patented it, right? So, but that's what I would recommend to people, which is surely you have a problem, surely you have a use case, rather than building a project for the sake of building a project, right? Actually solve your problem. I think that's the best way.
That's an interesting. So when you thought about, so let's say a person identifies a problem, right? How they should go about step by step to actually build a working solution.
Okay, yeah, we actually do cover that on the book, a little bit of self-promotion here. But the way I see it is, okay, so you have a problem, and the first thing we recommend is, okay, you go online and you see if someone solved that problem, right? To put in AWS specific terms, for example, the solution library, there's like a place, a one-stop shop, right, for solutions pre-built, but doesn't need to be AWS related again. Like it could be any cloud, any problem, networking problem, right? So you kind of check online, okay, in natural language nowadays, there's a bunch of AI that makes natural language very good, right? Like, did anybody solve my problem? And if so, that's great. You just kind of build that. But if not, you go into adjacent solutions, because usually architectures can be adapted, right? So you get an architecture, doesn't exactly solve your problem, maybe solves what, 20%, maybe 30, 40, 50%, I don't know. You take that and you build on that. So that would be how I recommend, I guess, most people or even everyone to go about solving one of these problems, right? And with that architecture, then this is like software engineering, right? You just kind of build on top, ask ChatGPT, something like that, right? Or you come to this course and you ask you.
Cool. Okay. So what are the common mistakes you have seen people doing when they're creating their first cloud projects? And let's focus only on AWS right now. Most of our audience is here, AWS related. So focusing specifically on AWS technologies, what are the common mistakes that you have seen people doing when they're building AWS projects?
Would you say like a technical mistake or just a mistake in general, or both?
In general.
In general, yeah. I think for sure the biggest mistake I see is that they start a very ambitious project, right? And they don't break it into parts, like milestone-wise. right? It's fine to start with a big thing in mind, like I just said, solving a practical thing, right? Getting the news in whatever form. That's great. But then that's a very big project, right? It's like you should break it down into milestones and then solve those mini projects, sort of speak, right? And oftentimes what I see even in resumes, right, is that folks started very big and then they end up with something very, very small that maybe not as meaningful. So I would say that's the first big problem that I see in these projects, especially when I'm talking with folks. And the technical one is that people like fancy tech. You know, when you're building your personal project, people like adding all the fancy stuff, you know, Istio, Kubernetes, this and that. So they're building a personal website and they're using like 20 technologies, right? Easily. I would say that's a big mistake, especially when you're starting out, right? Learning the fundamentals, you know, using first principles for me is critical, not only in AWS, but in general. And I think that applies 100% when you're building your first project.
Yeah, this perfect sense.
Do you agree?
And when they're building this project, sorry?
Do you agree or do you see it differently?
Oh, yeah. No, totally correct. In Hindi, we have a saying called "bilkul sahi," matlab, you know, absolutely right. So
Okay.
I keep defaulting to my native language. Okay, now when people are building their projects, right, for learning so that they can upskill, but their ultimate aim is to get a job, a cloud job, right? How should they actually showcase the projects that they're doing on their own in a resume so that they get noticed by the recruiters or the hiring managers?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. So most people that do projects, right, usually have a goal, and the goal usually is getting a job, right? I would say that's the most common goal, right? So I'm a very big fan of having it deployed, but I'm aware of the cost, right? So I'm a very big fan of, let's say you make a personal website, maybe you made, I don't know, a translator, doesn't matter, any project you've made. I'm a very big fan of having it really built, like with the DNS name, whatever that you can access. And I'm a very big fan of having that in your resume. So of course the description, technology, but also like you can access it here, just go here and press, right? I'm a very big fan of that. But again, I understand that cost might be prohibitive in some cases, right? For some folks. So in that case, I think like having a GitHub repo or even a personal blog, those are pretty much free nowadays. I think that's a very good way if having it live is not good. I would add though, that if you have it live and you do pass the first phase, like the CV phase, when you get called in an interview, it's very nice for the interview. It's like a wow factor, right? To just say, can I share my screen and I'll just show you, right? I'll show you how I have it built, or just show the console, show something. I think it's a very good wow factor for whoever is interviewing you, right? Like some guy or some girl just shows the console, like, yeah, you're talking about load balancers. Look at the load balancer I have configured that is doing this and that. I think is really good.
That's perfect. Exactly. When you're asked any technical question, if you can back it up with something that you have already built it and you can show them live, that will be amazing experience for the interviewer also. And you're right. Cost can somewhat might be a deterring factor for people, but AWS does provide a free tier. Almost every cloud provider provides a free tier. So unless you are using very high-end services, check the free tier services that are free, and that should be enough for you to actually learn and build services, right? And while learning, if you do it via IAC, which is infrastructure code, if you do via CloudFormation script, do it, build it up, it gets provisioned, test it, tear it down. Just before the interview, before an hour, build it up, show in the interview, tear it down. So
I was going to add that.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I think if you do it infrastructure as code, I think that's perfectly, like, that's amazing, which is like just bring it up before. I think that's great. But also something that is very good is that it will give you as an architect, you need to have an idea about pricing, right? Like sometimes the solution is feasible, but it's not because of pricing. So I think it also gives you that component to talk about, which is like, I built this and this, I calculated how much it costs me per hour, per day, whatever, right? Let's say €1 per hour. And you can tell that as well. You can say, listen, I just bring it up because, I'm not going to pay, 780 hours per month, right? I'm just going to use it right now. I think that's a really, really great one, using IAC, infrastructure as code.
Yeah, and there are other options for everyone who is listening. In case if you're, if you want more credits for AWS, you have AWS Community Builders Program. If you join that, you get free credits to do it. With the book that we have, Cloud Career Journeys. Now here I'm promoting my book. With that, the starter kit book, you do have access to WizLab sandboxes. And WizLab sandboxes provide, not all the services, but most of the services for you to do hands-on. And with that, you get 6 months free access to it. So look into the market. There are ways where you'll be able to get access to AWS credits one way or the other to build your projects and get more hands-on experience. Let cost not be a deterrent. That's what the idea is here.
Yeah, I've read your book, by the way,
And-
Prasad. It's a really good book. So for the folks listening, I also read it, right? And I would recommend it.
Thank you so much. I look forward to meeting you at reInvent and doing a like author exchange of the book.
For sure, for sure.
Awesome. Okay, so any best practices when people are building their personal blogs or GitHubs, or people even record their screen while building it and put it on YouTube just to showcase? Any best practices you have?
Yeah, so I'm a very shy person. Might not look it that I am, so I don't put it on YouTube. I think that's a great way to do it. I had to do it once a long time ago for a company. I didn't like it because it's my personality, right? But I think it's a really good one. For me personally, I really like, again, having it built and the code in some repo that you can speak to. Because at the end of the day, the interviewer can say, okay, tell me about this project that you say that you've built, right? But he also sees the code, probably commits are public. So it really shows that you've done it, right? And probably it will be obviously helpful if you can speak to it, right? That would be my personal best practice, right? But if you are a more, extroverted person, I think speaking to it on YouTube, maybe something like on those platforms is also very good, right? It adds up. It doesn't take away from it, which is good, right?
Yeah. And your personal profile also builds up over the time when you do it publicly on GitHub or blog like Medium. It's all free. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are a lot of blog sites like Dev2 or Medium where you can publish it for free. And then yes, YouTube, you can publish there for free. And over the time, when you keep doing it regularly, your GitHub commits, all of this, it's going to build up, and your personal brand also gets built up. So employees do notice you. And that also, I know a few folks whom we have mentioned in the Cloud Career Journeys book who have got calls just by being, consistently posting about what projects they are building on, what projects they are working on.
No, for sure. Like building your brand is very important, right? Like the projects are a part of it, but talking about it like on LinkedIn and so on, right? Surely can get you noticed, right? Both by interviewers, which is the focus, but even by other companies, right?
Yeah. And folks who do not follow Ivo, do follow Ivo on LinkedIn. He does post really good technical posts. I love your posts, Ivo.
Thank you. I post
and thank
often,
you so much
right?
for doing that to the community.
Yeah, if you like networking,
good, right? Yeah. Cool. Let's move on. At the beginning, you did touch upon certifications, right? But what's your perspective on pursuing certifications versus building practical projects when entering the cloud space?
Yeah, so actually, I do get that question often asked a lot, really, right? At reInvent, people ask me all the time. So I'll give some context. I have a lot of certifications, all AWS, but many, right? Like over 30 active certifications. So people often used to ask me, right, if I was just in the theory space, right? Because I have a lot of certifications. And I want to speak to that, right? Which is, for me, and I think that's what I recommend folks as well, certifications make it easy to study a topic that you're new on because they're very structured, or at least that's how I view them, right? Let's say you're starting in networking, you go study Cisco CCNA, right? It's going to start, this is IP, this is layer 2, this is layer 3, this is protocol. So it's very structured, and it was probably well taught by people, technical trainers. I don't know who thought about it, but someone thought about it, and there is a plan to follow. There's milestones, there's practice questions. So for me, it's very good to cement my knowledge on something new. So that's for the theory part, and that's why I do certifications. But I think that's not enough. There are some certifications, but not many, that, for example, Cisco CCIE, right, that has a practical part. It's an 8-hour practical exam. So there you have to practice practical stuff, and then you have the exam. But most exams do not, right? In the generic thinking, it's just theory. So I'm a big fan of complementing that, right? I don't think certifications are enough. I think you need, even if you have certifications, you should build a cloud portfolio. You're not just practice on your own, maybe practice on the job if you have a job that allows you to do that. But I think those are two separate things that I wish vendors intertwine more, if I'm honest, right? Even in Amazon, I write questions for some vendors, for example, ISSP, Cisco, etc. And I've been a very big advocate to actually make questions more practical. Let's say you are scrolling next, right? And one of the questions is actually like a CLI or an AWS console or Azure console. Just, I don't know, this is not working, fix it. and you have some more time. I'm a very big advocate for that because I think practical skills are very important on top of certifications. Okay.
Yeah, totally agree. Like certifications provides you a structured path in case if you have opportunity to work in your current organization on actual cloud projects, then you keep on learning automatically. But let's say you do not have that and you need a structured pathway. Certification provides a structured pathway. And I know for some folks, certification costs are high and it's a kind of a deterrent for them. So you don't need to take certification just for the sake of it. Use the structured pathway to get the learnings and do lots of hands-on practicals along with it. And knowledge is more important than the actual, though sometimes the certification, the badge helps you get a recruiter call. Sometimes recruiters do notice it when you have those, especially if you're transitioning into a cloud world, it shows some level of credibility. But then if you only get certification for the sake of it and you get the call, then you will be stuck. So both are important.
I would even argue that I agree with you, especially on the recruiter part. Sometimes when you're job changing, they look at it just as a first step, right? A way of like validating. Maybe they know, maybe they don't. But I think even that nowadays is becoming less prevalent. I don't know if you think that as well. But I've seen in the past or in some sectors, certifications were a very big thing, like very. I mean, if you didn't have them, they almost didn't call you. But I feel like that nowadays is not the case, or is becoming less the case.
Yes, and for good, I believe. Thankfully, industry
agree.
is more maturing, and they are not that like strict. Like I remember that time when if you don't have a college degree, no one will even talk to you for a job. Right now, at least college degree is long gone. Certification is going away. It's more about practical knowledge that you have.
I think we have some questions in the chat.
Okay.
You want me to read them out loud and I answer, or you answer? What do you prefer?
I'll take another question and then I'll ask Ashish to come on, and because there might be a lot of questions and he'll take up few of the questions. And then you will answer, like he'll just read out a few of the questions and then, and the question is that your book, I've seen the book, it has in 3 sections for the beginners, intermediate, advanced, right? Like what kind of projects have you included in each of these sections so that our audience understands that depending upon what, at what stage of their learning journey they are, what kinds of projects they should be looking into?
Yeah, so I structured it like that also more to be easier to have milestones rather than anything else. But since they're self-contained, you could easily jump from one to another, right? But basically what we put as basic, quote unquote, we started with the backbone services, or like, let's say, compute and storage, right? So data, like we start again, like I told you, static website, like S3, this type of things. Then we go to like EC2 with a backend that actually is not static, right? It does things. And then we have the same, but in a serverless way. So that's what we call basics. Basic for us was kind of bare bones services, like how you can build really anything, more using code within those services, right? Then when we go to intermediate during the book, is kind of taking on this and starting adding, like sugar on top, sort of speak, right? So we start using more fancy services of AWS, for example, managed services for AI, like transcribe, this type of things. And we start interconnecting them, right? We also add CI/CD already in the intermediate projects, because at the end of the day, if you are working in real world projects outside of your personal project, this is going to be your day-to-day, right? There will be CI/CD, there will be GitHub repos, all of that. So in the intermediate part, I would say we take the bare bones and we make it more productized, right? This will be what you see in a real world scenario. And then when you get to the advanced piece, right, is just something more specific. Of course, we have one about AI, right, using Bedrock and all the really latest AI technologies, because it's something folks are very interested on in general. It's a very hype one. But also data analytics. So the advanced ones are more specific and might not even apply to everyone. For example, myself, I don't work analytics that much. It's very rare. Maybe I get the question, but it's not really my thing. So it's something that if you want to learn on, it's there. It's a more advanced topic, touches many things, but there again, they're self-contained. So that's kind of how we separated it, but we allow readers, to just jump through what is more interesting for them.
Yeah, and for anyone who's interested, Ivo's book is available on Amazon. I've pasted the link for co.uk, but yeah, you can use it in your whichever Amazon local region you are in. And I think it's also available on Pact website, Ivo.
Yeah, that's correct. I think it's available on most online retailers. They're managing it for us, but I think Amazon and Pack are the big ones.
Are the big ones. Okay, cool. So I'll let now Ashish join. Ashish, are you there? Would you like to come and if there are any questions that audience are more interested in?
Yeah, questions are always there, and when person like Ivo is there who has built portfolio and written a book, obviously questions are there. There was a comment, Ivo, that somebody was looking into your book, and today you are here. So good combination.
Thank you.
Okay. So question which is coming up. Let me put it here. Let me see if I can put it here. Give me a minute. So it is about that. What are the top 3 skills to have a good skill? What are top 3 skills for a good candidate to be in cloud?
Technical skills, I assume, right? Or
Well, this is just skills they said.
Just skills.
So I would say that it is up to you what you want to frame it into.
Right. So I would start with one that is not technical, but I think is key for cloud networking. I could speak to those two because that's the ones I worked with, but I think it will apply more broader, which is learning, right? Like, I think a person that can learn and actively learns, like, for example, I read a lot. That's an example. We will always have an advantage, right? You'll go to an interview. Maybe they're going to ask you different questions that you were not expecting, and you just reply, I don't know that, but if you give me time, I'll learn, and that's okay. And that's what will probably happen in a job anyway. Myself, Prasad, you, Ashish, for sure. I mean, during our jobs, I get a lot of questions that I don't know the answer to. Like, I'll go to a call, they tell me, how do I configure this? And I have no idea. Like, I don't know. And I say, like, I don't know, but, I will get back to you, and that's okay. But being able to do that, having also the humility, right, to say you don't know, is paramount, right? In interviewing, but just after getting the job as well, right? So that would be the first, for sure, for me at least. Okay. The second one, and this is a controversial one, but for me, technical skills are very important, right? So I would say pick something, right, and be deep on it. Some people, for example, ask me, okay, when you become principal or higher, oftentimes you are less technical, right? You become, you are doing strategic projects sometimes. There's more, management, sort of speak. And you not necessarily, you don't have to lose your technical skills, but that's something that sometimes happens. For me, staff above, principal above, doesn't really matter. I think being technical in some area, your vertical, right? For example, for me is networking, not only helps to keep your brand, like we were talking before, but I think is paramount, right? But I think being like a respected technical individual in your vertical is critical, right? And even if you are in a more junior role, that doesn't matter, right? For me, when you go to an interview, you put in your CV, okay, I'm good in networking. When I talk to you, I expect you to know networking stuff, okay? And the last skill, I think, is being able to speak to a topic at different levels. Let's say you are, again, I will take networking as an example. Let's say I'm speaking to the CTO. I will not talk about, ARP or ARP poisoning or whatever, right? I'll maybe talk about how networking can influence cost, how can we make it faster for his customers. But when I'm talking with the SRE team and they're saying, this is going slow, we will need to speak about latency, where the path is traveling. I think for especially in the cloud where it's so broad, right? There's so many services, there's so many things. It's important to be able to, understand where are you talking, to whom are you talking, and adapt that. Those would be my 3 skills. I know only 2 of them were not technical, but yeah.
No, that makes perfect sense. Actually,
very
sharpening the saw, depending upon whichever level you're, it doesn't matter. Spare some time to keep sharpening your saw. Like choose one specific specialty and become a SME in it. That's going to help for a very long time. And as I was said, if you're able to speak, at a 10,000 level feet as well as 1,000 level feet, that is going to be very handy, especially when you, go up higher in your roles.
Differently, we'll say.
Yeah.
There's one specific question is about transitioning from Cisco to cloud. How was your journey?
Best person to answer.
Yeah. All right. So Cisco is only networking, right? Or at least they're known to be a networking vendor. While I was at Cisco, you can do not networking at Cisco. I'll start by saying that. Maybe you are at Cisco and you are cloud. It's possible. But usually you are a networking guy. For me, I started doing a lot of the theory stuff. So I did a lot of the certifications. I'll tell you that, yes. And then I started to try to get hands-on. And even before I left Cisco, I was already in a team and I was not doing networking. I was actually working with AWS Cloud already within Cisco. So my journey was kind of like that. Was a lot of self-learning on other domains that are not networking, like compute, for example. Like you don't touch that at Cisco, and even on networking pieces that Cisco doesn't touch. So Cisco usually does very deep networking stuff, routing protocols, all of these MPLS, crazy stuff. When you come to the cloud, networking is very different, right? VPC networking is very different and usually very simplified. So my journey was that, right? Was really following kind of like the Go Cloud careers, which is like I learned a lot of theory, then I practiced a lot, right? I mean self projects, right? And eventually I was lucky enough to land a job in the cloud, again, still in Cisco. And then just transition to AWS was much smoother because I was already doing that.
And you make a very important point. Irrespective of what current skills, if you have a technical skill, irrespective of what it is transferable to cloud.
Yeah,
I know a
for sure.
friend who was a mainframe expert, and he was worried that mainframes is getting obsolete. But now he's like soaring high in cloud because all the mainframes is like how to migrate and modernize mainframes on cloud, right? So in that ways, whichever legacy technology you have, database administrator, it doesn't matter. Like a lot of database administrator feels like their skill is not being used, but just transition to cloud and you'll see that there is so much database administration, just a different way. You already know the basics, you already have those skills. It's a more simpler way to do it on the cloud and a bit different.
I get
Completely agree.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, means see, concepts once you learn, they will not fade away. IP would still be IP, even if it is Amazon or AWS or anyone, it will be still the same. So foundation is solid. You could keep on building on top of it. But yeah, if you just start and say, I would just understand VPC, not networking behind it, it's going to be complicated game for you in the long run. So yeah, that's all. Means, and there was one more question about like, uh, how you could like showcase skills like into an interview. You need to go very technically deep into these topics, like they are, let's say you build a project, right? And now you need to talk about only one specific service which you know more, or should it be generalist services you should be talking about?
That's very personal, I would say, right? So I think it depends on the job you're interviewing for, first of all, right? If it's a very technical job, let's say a TEM is more technical than an SA, the solution architect, right? Sorry to use acronyms here. So I would say that, but I would give you this, I would give this tip to the audience, which is when you are interviewing, you can steer the conversation to where you are more comfortable. Let's say someone is asking me a question about the project that I know I'm very strong in the networking piece of it. I will try to start speak with it and I'll start to steer the conversation to show where I'm really strong, right? Now, if someone asks me a question for storage, I don't like storage. So if someone asks me a question about storage, right, I'll try to stay high level and talk about, maybe the benefits of solution, but always answering the question, right? No, don't just go on a tangent and talk about something else. I would say the tip there is really, know where you're strong at, know where is your strengths lie, and just speak to those.
That's good thing. Yeah, means that's amazing. Agree on that. Steer the conversation where you feel comfortable.
Yeah, something that we always try and explain to the audience, that interview is driven by the candidate also, not just by the interviewer. Obviously, interviewer has some questions in mind and they have some criteria to evaluate you, but it's up to you how you drive the conversation. It starts with your intro. The first 2 minutes of the interview kinds of starts, where in which direction you're going to take it. So yeah, very well resonate with what you're saying, Ivo.
So that's all, Prasad and Ivo. I would say like it's almost time 4:32. It's so good to have you, Ivo, and really interesting conversation. And obviously, your book is really a gem. It would help a lot of people in building the portfolio. And portfolios are important when everyone has the similar type of skills and applying for similar type of job. Probably portfolio is something which could differentiate you from the other in interview or in resume selection. It could be really helpful. And as you said that there are a lot of resources available, you are not limited that you do not have resource. You could use AWS labs. Then there is sandboxes available. Free AWS account can be created, and like Prasad was mentioning, the sandbox account from WizLab, it is not just for AWS. In that book you get AWS and maybe for Microsoft, maybe for Google Cloud. So you get sandboxes and you build it. And like you were saying that you do not need to keep it running 24/7. Build it, create a cloud formation, tear it off, and then push the cloud formation again and build on top of it and save it. So that should be the way you can leverage the free sandboxes in an easier way and build your portfolio. So thank you, everyone. Thanks, Prasad. Thanks, Ivo. And we hope to see you again. Thanks, Sharik, behind the scene. Sharik was answering a lot of question. I'll add you again, Sharik. So thanks for answering that question. And obviously, Purna is our curious customer who has lots of questions. And I really like the way she answers question, because at the end, she summarizes whatever we have discussed. So that is also a good thing. Probably she is away from camera, but really interesting discussion. And we hope to see you all again next week. Any feedback, any suggestion, let us know. And we would have another session next week, and we'll keep moving forward. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you all. And thank you, Ivo, once again.
Thank you,
Thank you for
Ivo.
having me.
Thanks, Ivo.